Recap. Around this time yesterday, President Trump posted on Truth Social that he'll impose emergency 25% tariffs, ramping up to 50% after a week on all Colombian imports after the country denied entry of 2 U.S. planes carrying deported migrants. Colombia's president responded he wasn't scared of Trump's tactics and threatened a retaliatory tariff of a 50% on U.S. goods. But just a few hours later, Colombia acquiesced, allowing the planes to land. Will this be Trump's negotiating tactic going forward? For more on what this portends for tariffs and trade, joining us is Tobin Marcus. He is head of policy and politics at Wolfe Research. Tobin, it's great to have you. What do we learn from this?
Yeah, very exciting weekend. So, look, I think it's been clear all along that there was one category of Trump's tariff agenda that's what we saw over the weekend. These sort of big threats that are made to extract non-trade concessions. And so I think what we learned is he's not afraid to go big on those threats. And he is very, very intent on kind of compelling compliance with his immigration agenda in these cases where we need cooperation from other countries on things like repatriation of deported migrants. So I think the clearest read through in terms of the rest of the tariff threats, which obviously we have China, we have Canada, we have Mexico, we have the EU, we have the universal tariff threats of the rest of the world. Canada and Mexico are the most similarly situated ones. That's the other kind of main situation where he's made tariff threats with immigration as one of the big asks. You know, I don't know that it really changes the outlook on the Canada and Mexico threats all that much. We're headed for this theoretical deadline on Saturday. The threat's out there. And I don't think we've learned the extent to which he's really willing to tolerate economic pain in service of this agenda because, you know, in the Colombian case, not only did it not happen, but it was a really small magnitude of trade, sort of what, $18 billion of gross trade that was exposed.
Yeah. You know, we spoke to Derek Scissors about this on Friday, but this whole kind of interesting shift that we've seen from the president where he's really going after kind of Mexico, to some extent Canada, Colombia, really pressing hard on the immigration issue, on some of the fentanyl issues and other things that we're dealing with in Mexico. The tariffs of 25%, again, could be a few days away. We'll see. And meanwhile, it's been very quiet on the China front, even while we're talking about all that they're doing with AI and this like leading edge work. What do you make of that?
So I think it's the point that we've always made is that there are different kinds of tariff threats that Trump is making, and that we should think about them differently from an investment and market perspective. In the China case, our argument has always been it's probably going to be big, but it's probably going to be slow. He's going to want to do these big bilateral negotiations with President Xi about the whole variety of U.S.-China issues and equities before going through with the tariff threats, which we still think he will eventually when those talks fail to come together with a sort of fully satisfying deal for both sides. I just think that's a very different type of strategy than what he has in the Mexican case, where the idea isn't that we have such unfair trade that we need 25% tariffs to stay in place forever. It's not that we need to raise revenue from this. It's that we want them to make some policy shifts, and this is the cudgel that he's wielding to get that to happen.
And what would you put the odds of tariffs happening on Mexico on Saturday at this point?
I think it's under 50-50 in terms of whether he goes on Saturday. But I think the more important consideration for markets is probably, like, will they stay in place for the long term? I think the answer is no. Hard to fully predict whether or not he pulls the trigger on it. If so, you know, that's probably a couple of bad days in markets. But I don't think there's a world where we're just living with 25% tariffs on Mexico indefinitely. The point there is very much to get the kind of win that he got in the Colombia case, where you make the threat, you don't really have to suffer a lot of pain, and you end up getting compliance on these sort of non-trade topics.
So in that sense, a little preview of what may be to come. Tobin, thanks. Appreciate it today. Tobin Marcus of Wolfe Research.